Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to Unacademy, your one-stop destination for UPSC Civil Services preparation in the English medium. My name is Chethan N. I've been teaching civil service aspirants for the past 9+ years and have taught lakhs of aspirants and have mentored many successful candidates. I teach international relations, internal security and current affairs. Now, I'm super excited to be teaching at Unacademy. In 1947, Sardar Patel, the Iron Man of India, the first Home Minister of India, referred to civil servants as the steel frame of India. This statement remains true even today. It's an established fact that the civil services play a critical role in nation building. And I strongly believe that this is what makes the civil services one of the most aspirational dream for millions of aspirants in our country. So if you're one amongst them, and if your dream is to crack this elite exam, then it shall be our duty to guide you towards that goal. So join us every day right here on our YouTube channel, and we promise to help you achieve the dream of yours. So hit the subscribe button, press the bell icon for notifications, and we will ensure that you will get the most content-rich, exam-relevant material to help you guide in your preparation. So with this, let's begin with the Hindu analysis for today, by first looking at the topics that we're going to discuss. And you can see that I've chosen 7 important articles from the daily edition of the Hindu. We have 3 important columns that require a detailed discussion and a comprehensive analysis. These topics are very, very relevant for your mains, and there are some points that could be important for your prelims as well. Then we have 4 smaller articles that are prelim specific, and we shall take a look at these articles at the end. So I'll ensure that these discussions will be as comprehensive as possible, along with the background, the analysis, so that you can develop the critical thinking needed to write descriptive answers in mains. And it should also give you the conceptual clarity to help you give the right answer in your prelims as well. So in return, just press the like button, share your comments. I'll go through the comments later, and without fail, subscribe to the channel. So let's begin with the first article. On page number 8, we have a column written by Gautam Bhatia that talks about the topic of genocide. So let's understand the context, why the topic of genocide is in news, and then we will examine what is genocide. Is there a convention that defines genocide? What kind of punishment does it provide for? What does India have to say about the Genocide Convention? And we'll also talk about the World Court, the ICJ, which finds a mention in this article. And of course, we will take a look at the author's viewpoint regarding the issue that he is examining over here. So first, let's look at the context. Let's understand why the topic is in news. See, recently, on the 7th of October, an extremist outfit known as Hamas carried out a brutal attack against Israel. It killed thousands of innocent Israeli civilians, and in return, Israel has launched a war in Gaza to target Hamas. In this ongoing conflict, more than 24,000 Palestinians have been killed, and majority of them are civilians. So this has given rise to global outrage against Israel, and Israel has been accused of using disproportionate force, that too when it comes to targeting civilians. So South Africa has recently filed an application at the International Court of Justice, which is also referred to as the World Court, accusing Israel of committing a genocide against Palestinian civilians. So this is where the topic of genocide comes up. South Africa's allegation is that Israel is committing violations of the International Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, or also popularly known as the Genocide Convention. So first, let's begin with the basics. Let's understand what is the Genocide Convention. Let's cover some basic facts that could help you in your prelims as well. Let's understand the definition of genocide as given in the convention and what penalties or punishments does it lay out for the member states. The Genocide Convention primarily applies for the state parties which have signed and ratified it. There are more than 150 UN member states which are party to the Genocide Convention. This is the only international legal instrument that we have which criminalizes genocide. It declares genocide as a crime, and it was adopted in 1948, opened for signatures, and finally it came into force in 1951. Now, what exactly is genocide? See, this term was coined by a very popular Jewish lawyer, Raphael Lemkin. Raphael Lemkin was a Polish lawyer of Jewish descent. And by looking at the atrocities that Nazi Germany was committing against the Jews in Europe, he pushed for a designation for such mass extermination of people on the lines of nationality, race, ethnicity, religion, etc. So he coined the term genocide and pushed for the adoption of an international convention to criminalize the act of genocide. So following the First World War, with the rise of Nazi Germany, targeted persecution against the Jews had begun by late 1920s and early 1930s. So through the efforts of Raphael Lemkin, finally a resolution was brought up at the UNGA, and after the Second World War, this resolution was pushed by many countries, including India. India was one of the countries that sponsored this resolution at the UN General Assembly following the end of the Second World War. So finally, this convention was adopted that criminalized genocide and provided for obligations for the member countries. The member countries who sign and ratify the convention, they are obligated to declare genocide as a criminal punishable offense. They are supposed to bring out a national legislation as well, according to Article 5 of the convention, to criminalize genocide, and they themselves have to ensure that they don't commit an act of genocide. They should also prevent an act of genocide from being committed. And they should provide for very strict penal provisions to ensure that those officials or even private individuals who are involved in an act of genocide are given the strictest of punishment. Accordingly, tribunals have to be set up. The criminal justice system has to be established in accordance with this international convention. So this convention clearly defines what is a genocide, and it is nothing but an act of mass extermination of a group of people based on their identity, either their nationalistic identity or their ethnicity, their race or their religion. So such an act could be conducted either by an authoritarian dictatorial government, or there could be private individuals involved as well, or it could be a combination of the two. So any such mass extermination of a group of people on the basis of their nationality, ethnicity, race or religion is classified as genocide under the convention. It clearly specifies 5 particular acts that qualify as genocide. It's not just the killing of the members of the group, but even an attempt to cause serious bodily harm, physical harm, or even inflict mental trauma on a group of people based on their identity also qualifies to be labeled as genocide. It also includes deliberate imposition of harsh living conditions on a group of people with the intention of destroying the group. Let's say if a state, authoritarian state, is targeting a particular group based on their ethnicity or religion, and if it is imposing harsh living conditions on them through deliberately discriminatory policies which are brought out, right? And the intention, if it is to destroy the whole group, even this qualifies as an act of genocide. It also covers any attempt to restrict the population of the community, preventing births, displacing children deliberately, transferring them in order to reduce the demography of the population, right? All these acts classified to be known as genocide under the Genocide Convention. So this has to be declared as a criminal offense, and the signatories have to take adequate measures to prevent from such acts being committed. So anyone who is directly or indirectly complicit with these acts will be punishable. So it could be government officials, military officials, or even civilians, private individuals could be punishable under this convention. Now coming to India, India has signed the convention, of course, because we sponsored the resolution and we have adopted the resolution as well. So we have ratified the Genocide Convention, but however, India has not passed any national legislation as per the provisions of Article 5 of this convention. I told you earlier, Article 5 of the Genocide Convention, it mandates the signatories to bring out a national law to declare genocide as a crime and to list out the punishments and to set up the criminal justice system in such a way that genocide can be effectively tackled. But in the case of India, even though we have signed and ratified the convention, we haven't brought out a national legislation. And hence, many legal experts argue that India has not fully obliged as per the obligations under the Genocide Convention. Recently, in fact, a question came up in front of the Indian Parliament. Recently, an opposition leader raised a question in the Rajya Sabha in 2022 whether India has taken any steps to adopt the provisions of Genocide Convention into our national law. To this, the government of India replied on the floor of the House. The Minister of State from the Home Ministry replied on the floor of the House that India is a signatory to the convention, we have ratified it, but however, there is no need for a separate law to bring the provisions into effect in India. The argument of the government is that since India has ratified this international convention, automatically it becomes a part of common law in the country. So the government has said existing provisions of IPC and CRPC, of course, those laws are being replaced. I'm talking about the government's reply in 2022. So under the existing provisions of IPC and CRPC, the government said there are enough provisions to cover such criminal acts as defined under Genocide Convention, and there is no need for a separate law. While this remains the stand of the government of India, many critics, legal and constitutional experts have pointed out that India is not fulfilling this obligation. For example, if you look at Article 51 of the Indian Constitution, it mandates the Indian state under the directive principles to abide by international norms and to respect international treaties and conventions. Article 253 empowers the Parliament as well to bring out laws, to enact laws in order to ensure that India matches its commitments, meets its commitments with regard to international treaties and conventions. So many experts say that despite these constitutional provisions being present, India has not taken these measures to bring out a law to criminalize genocide in the country. The government says it's already part of common law. The judiciary can draw from international precedents while interpreting these cases, and there are existing provisions under our criminal laws which is more than sufficient. So this remains India's stand with regard to Genocide Convention. Next, the article is also mentioning ICJ because South Africa, which has filed a case against Israel, right? It has filed the case at ICJ, International Court of Justice, also popularly known as the World Court. So let's take a look at some important factual points related to ICJ, and then we will analyze the article and look at the author's viewpoint. The ICJ is one of the primary organs of the United Nations. The UN, which was established in 1945, it is made up of a few primary organs like UN General Assembly, UN Security Council, etc. So ICJ is one such primary organ. It was established in 1945 through the Charter of the United Nations. When the UN Charter was adopted, the ICJ was established and it functions as the judicial organ, the principal judicial organ of the UN. It is headquartered at the Peace Palace in Hague, which is in Netherlands. So these are some basic facts that you can remember for your prelims. But let's see what kind of cases does ICJ deal with. Can private companies go and file cases over here? Can we go and file cases at ICJ? Right? So that's a very important point that you should understand. According to the UN Charter, the ICJ was created primarily to settle disputes between UN member states. So there are two types of cases that are entertained by ICJ. Only two types of cases. One is a contentious dispute involving two UN member states. That is any legal dispute arising between two UN member countries which have signed and adopted the UN Charter. They can file cases. For example, India, Pakistan have a history of filing cases against each other at ICJ. Recently, we approached the ICJ to secure relief for Kulbhushan Jadhav, an Indian national who has been arrested in Pakistan on espionage charges and delivered the death penalty. So we managed to get a stay order on the death penalty through ICJ's intervention. Even Pakistan has filed cases against India in the past regarding violations of Indus Water Treaty, etc. Pakistan also has dragged India to the ICJ before. So only UN member states can file cases against each other to settle any contentious matter, any disputed matter. And the other provision is that the organs of UN, the specialized agencies of UN, it could be UNESCO, UN Environment Program, UN Development Program, the various bodies of UN, the various specialized agencies and organs of the UN, they can approach ICJ for advisory opinion. To obtain legal advice, they can approach ICJ. So these are the only two types of applications or petitions entertained by the ICJ. Now, please go through the composition of ICJ as well. It can be very important for your prelims. It is made up of judges, 15 judges, who are elected from different countries. The manner of election is through a simultaneous election through both UN General Assembly and UN Security Council, and the contesting candidate judges, they have to get an absolute majority in both UNG and UNSC. For example, India has a representative, but of course the judge here will not represent their country. There is an Indian judge, a former Supreme Court judge, Dalveer Bhandari, Justice Dalveer Bhandari, who is currently a sitting judge of the ICJ. But once they are elected, they no longer represent their country. They are not the country's representative. They are a neutral, unbiased judicial member of the ICJ functioning under the UN norms. This is something you should be very clear on. UPSC could test you on these lines. That shows your conceptual clarity again. So they are eligible for re-election. They get a 9-year term, and 1/3 of the composition is changed every 3 years. So every 3 years there is an election that takes place. But however, please remember that once the judges are elected, right, they don't represent their country. They are unbiased, neutral judicial members of the ICJ, acting strictly in accordance with international law and the principles of the UN Charter. So now that we have covered all the basics related to this topic, let's take a look at what the author is arguing. So we understood that South Africa has filed a case against Israel, alleging that Israeli armed forces are committing a genocide against Palestinians. Now, this application of South Africa has received a lot of support from the global South countries. That is, from the developing, underdeveloped world. Several countries from Asia, Africa, Latin America, they are backing South Africa completely, and they're trying to build up evidence at the ICJ to at least show that Israel is prima facie involved in committing an act of genocide. Now, this stand of South Africa and the global South countries is being strongly opposed by the West, by the Western powers, especially Germany, France, US, and others, which are seen as close allies of Israel. France has went one step ahead. It has even said, if ICJ acts against Israel under the Genocide Convention, if ICJ holds Israel accountable for committing a genocide, then France is not going to follow the orders of ICJ. It's going to withdraw its obligation under ICJ. Germany, on the other hand, has extended complete support to Israel, and it is backing Israel's position, and it's providing support at the ICJ as well in its legal diplomatic stand. Now, the author is presenting the other opinion of these countries, the Western countries especially, right, which exposes their hypocrisy on these matters. But again, this is the author's opinion. The author compares this with a recent situation which had developed in Myanmar just a few months back, following the civil war in Myanmar and the targeting of minorities in Myanmar, especially the Rohingya minorities, by Myanmar's military. Genocide charges were brought up against Myanmar as well at the ICJ. These charges were accepted by the ICJ, and based on preliminary findings, certain provisional measures were issued to Myanmar's government. Now, this case against Myanmar was brought up by the African country of Gambia. So it shows that any country can bring up genocide charges at ICJ. It need not be an affected party. For example, South Africa is not an affected party with the Gaza war. Gambia is not an affected party with regard to the civil war and the persecution of minorities in Myanmar. But still, any UN member state can raise these accusations of a genocide being committed under the Genocide Convention and bring that case to ICJ and file those charges against the alleged country. But in this particular case, which was just a few months back, Germany completely supported Gambia against Myanmar. Germany gave complete support at UN and ICJ to ensure that Myanmar was held guilty for committing a genocide. And in fact, the preliminary verdict was that Myanmar is guilty, and some provisional directives were issued by the ICJ. temporary interim directives were issued, which brought a lot of international pressure on Myanmar, which even led to its eventual sanctions. But now look at Germany, look at the contradictory position it is taking in a similar situation where civilians are being killed in large numbers, where there is prima facie evidence to indicate that disproportionate force is being used by Israeli forces. So that is the whole point of the writer. The writer says that international law, as we know, is largely defined by the Western countries. International law that we all see as sacrosanct, it's a construct of the Western world, the Western imperial world, and they will break the rules when they want, they will follow the rules when they want, meaning they serve their self-interest by twisting the very purpose of international law. So that is the crux of the argument the writer is making. But however, to bring fairness into this argument, let's move away from what the writer is saying. Let's look at the other side of the argument. Now the big question is it right, is it fair to accuse Israel of committing a genocide? Wasn't it Hamas, an extremist group which carried out a brutal attack on 7th October, killing 1,300 innocent Israelis? Doesn't Israel have the right to defend itself, and doesn't Israel have the right to act against Hamas? So if genocide allegations are being brought up against Israel, then why not bring up the allegations against Hamas? That's a valid question, a valid point. Can we file cases? Can a country file a case against Hamas and accuse Hamas of committing a genocide? So let's look at what international law says over here. You've already understood the concept. Now it's just about applying the concept. Please remember, Hamas is not a state actor. Hamas is a non-state actor. Even though it's a representative of the Gaza Strip, of the Palestinian region, it's not a legitimate UN member state. It's not a state actor. It's a non-state actor. So what did I tell you about ICJ? ICJ will entertain cases only between state parties. So South Africa's case against Israel is taken up. India's case against Pakistan is taken up. But a case against Hamas will not be accepted because Hamas is a non-state actor. But however, Hamas can also be alleged of having committed a genocide at another international court, which is ICC. And here the Genocide Convention can be invoked. The International Criminal Court, or ICC, is set up specifically for this purpose. You have the Rome Statute, which provides for the establishment of the International Criminal Court that looks into war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, etc. So there, be it a state actor or a non-state actor, they can be charged if such crimes are alleged to have been committed. And you already know that Genocide Convention provides for prosecution of both state officials and private individuals. So be it a state or non-state actor, it doesn't matter under Genocide Convention. Problem is with ICJ. ICJ's structure is such that its composition, its mandate is such that it only deals with disputes between UN member states. So Hamas being a non-state actor, a case like this cannot be accepted against Hamas at the ICJ. But however, those charges can be pressed at the International Criminal Court. So this is something you have to note down. Very, very important. It's a counter argument. So to conclude my discussion, the key point the writer is highlighting is that if Western countries behave in this way, where they twist international law to suit their self-national interests, and if they don't genuinely care about democracy, human rights, etc., then this threatens the rules-based international order. So in the global community, there is a sense of stability because of international law and the belief that every member is obliged by international law and follows international law. So if you look at the case of Germany, where it backed Gambia against Myanmar, but now it's backing Israel, trying to defeat the allegation raised by South Africa. So this, according to the writer, is Western imperialism. This, according to the writer, is a display of the fact that international law, modern international law that we have today, the institutions that have been created, they're largely a Western construct, right? Created with an imperial mindset. It is designed to serve the powerful countries, the rich and the powerful. And that is the argument he is highlighting. He says that if this is the practice of Western countries and the major developed nations, right, this undermines the legitimacy of international law itself. It weakens the rules-based international system that we have created. So with this, I would like to end the discussion on the first topic, and let's move on to the next article from page number 9. This important column is written by Union Minister Gajendra Singh Shekhawat, who is the Minister for the Jal Shakti Ministry, and he is presenting a very important argument regarding the Jal Jeevan Mission. The Jal Jeevan Mission is one of the important government schemes which is intended to provide clean drinking water for our rural households. So in this column, it's a elaborate, detailed column by the minister. He talks about the vision behind Jal Jeevan Mission, the goal, the objectives. He's talking about the implementation model the government is following. He presents the success rate, backs it with data. So I feel it's a very important topic because there can be a possible mains question. UPSC might ask you to evaluate the implementation of Jal Jeevan Mission. So let's take a look at it in detail. First, let's understand some basic facts about Jal Jeevan Mission. This could be important for your prelims as well. This important mission was launched in 2019 by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It is implemented by the Jal Shakti Ministry, and its primary objective is to deliver safe and adequate and clean drinking water to rural households by 2024. To ensure that every rural household in the country is connected with a piped water connection, a tapped water connection, so that clean drinking water becomes accessible to our rural population. That is the primary objective of the mission, and it is in line with SDG 6 of the UN. Sustainable Development Goal of the UN, goal number 6, deals with clean water and sanitation. So in line with this agenda of sustainable development goals, the Union government has launched the Jal Jeevan Mission. Now this mission, which has been implemented over the last 4 to 5 years, has delivered tremendous success and progress. According to data presented by the minister, 73% of the rural households are connected with piped water supply today, thanks to Jal Jeevan Mission. The minister says that 14 crore rural households have been covered since the mission was launched, compared to just around 3 crore households which were covered until 2019. So look at the stark difference. In fact, that is presented very well in this map, which is available on the ministry website. I've taken this image, right, from the ministry's website. If you visit the Jal Jeevan Mission's website, you can see a dashboard, a real-time dashboard which updates the data regarding how many rural household tap connections have been provided. So according to the dashboard, more than 19 crore households have been covered. In just last 4 years, 14 crore households have been covered, whereas until 2019, it was just 3.5 crore households that were covered. The dashboard also says that nearly 73% of the rural households have been covered. You can see the drastic change happening by looking at these maps. Just look at the coverage of the Jal Jeevan Mission, and almost across the length and breadth of the country, there is extensive coverage of piped water connection in rural areas. So this, according to the minister, represents the success of Jal Jeevan Mission. Now, there is a very important concept to understand here, which the article is not dealing with, but I would like to go beyond that and help you understand why clean drinking water is crucial. From a governance perspective, from an administrative point of view, why clean drinking water is crucial and why should the government deliver clean drinking water? See, there are many studies which have established the link between clean drinking water and health and hygiene. Your health directly depends on the quality of water that you're consuming, right? It's not just about the quality, whether you have access to it. Is clean water easily available, right? So, a study conducted by Nobel laureate Dr. Michael Kremer established that access to clean drinking water has a direct impact on infant mortality rate. The study established that if a particular region has access to clean and safe drinking water, infant mortality rate can be brought down by almost 30%. It prevents 25% mortality amongst children under the age of 5 years. In a country like India, this is very significant because we lose lakhs of children every year. Infants every year are lost due to disorders, diseases related to unclean water. Waterborne diseases are a major threat for infants under the age of 5 years. A study conducted by WHO reiterates the point. The WHO study says that 4 lakh diarrheal deaths can be averted if every household in India is provided with access to clean and safe drinking water. So this is why the government is very interested to ensure that every rural household is connected with a piped water connection. So now that we understood the motivation behind it, let's look at the impact of the mission. According to the minister, the mission has already helped the country save up to $101 billion. How is this possible? It is possible due to reduced healthcare costs. With clean water, better health is a given, right? If diseases can be averted, the healthcare expenditure, out-of-pocket health expenditure goes down. And also, the mission, as it is so ambitious, creates numerous jobs in the rural areas. When these piped connections have to be laid, the government employs labor, and this is meaningful labor. So job creation also plays a role in providing economic benefits out of this initiative. So the government is saying that it has helped the government realize benefits worth more than $100 billion. And also another important point about the mission is that it has been made very flexible. It's been designed in a very flexible way because India has a very diverse geography. Compare the geography terrain of North India with Northeast India with South and West India. So you can't have a uniform solution. You can't have a one-size-fits-all solution. So by realizing that, the government has ensured that in the design of the mission itself, flexibility has been incorporated into it. Depending on the region, depending on the geography and terrain of the region, the scheme is flexible in its implementation. This largely is responsible for the success of the mission as well. For example, in hilly, cold areas, insulated pipes have been used to ensure that there is steady supply of clean water. In areas where water contamination is high, where water quality has been a concern, purification plants have been set up at the local level, at the community level. This helps in achieving the motto of the mission, which is essentially no one is left behind. Essentially, it focuses on inclusive growth, inclusive development. And by customizing the mission for every region, for every geography and terrain, the mission has been able to achieve success in different rural parts of the country. And the other important feature of the mission is that it is community driven. It aims to trigger a Jan Andolan. It aims to create a community-led movement where the local community plays a big role in the implementation of the scheme. For example, in decision making regarding the implementation of the project, women leaders at the grassroots, the panchayat level, play a big role. Local youth are involved in maintenance of the piped connections that are provided. NGOs and civil society organizations are given a direct role in driving the implementation of the mission. So there is extensive community involvement. There is people's participation because that is the very motto of the mission as well. One of the key pillars of Jal Jeevan Mission is to promote a Jan Andolan, to create a community-led movement, a participatory movement. In fact, if you look at this initiative, Nal Jal Mitra initiative, this becomes very evident. Under this initiative, local people are being trained. They are being provided the right skills so that they can carry out minor repairs and maintenance of the pipeline without waiting for government's intervention. Right? If you train the local people, especially the local youth or the local women leaders, they themselves can look after the repair and maintenance of these pipelines, thus ensuring better outcomes through the implementation of this mission. So this community-driven focus of the mission is what makes it really unique. And it also gives a lot of priority for transparency and accountability to ensure that there is no diversion of funds, to ensure that all stakeholders are informed about the progress of the mission. There is a real-time dashboard the ministry has created. That's where I took the data from as well, that you saw earlier. The images that you saw earlier was taken from the dashboard that the government has presented. So if you visit the website, you can see in real time the progress that the mission is making. So such dashboard-based management, a management information system, helps bring transparency and accountability as it provides information regarding the progress of the mission in the public domain. It places that in the public domain. And to ensure water quality, there is continuous monitoring and surveillance. Sensors are deployed across rural areas, and regular lab testing of water is carried out to look out for contaminants, to look out for dangerous pathogens that could be present in drinking water. So this has been automated as well, at least the data management part of it has been automated by the ministry through a water quality management information system. The MIS model of management has been implemented to continuously track water quality and ensure that the water is clean and safe for our people to drink. So this is where the scheme really stands out. The mission stands out because it has an option for grievance redressal. If water quality is not adequate, you will get to know on the dashboard. The local people will be informed immediately and they can raise a grievance and get it addressed immediately. Also, there are checks and balances to ensure that the funds are not misused, that the scheme is not misused in any way. There is transparency and accountability because of the dashboard-based management and the involvement of better managerial practices. So these are some unique aspects about the Jal Jeevan Mission, and this could be asked as a mains question. So now, let's look at the third important column from page number 10. The column deals with the free movement regime between India and Myanmar. This topic is in news because recently, Home Minister Amit Shah, he said that we have to revoke or we have to reconsider the free movement regime between India and Myanmar due to certain security issues that are emanating from Myanmar from across the border into northeast India. The Home Minister said that the free movement regime will be reconsidered by the government and most likely India is going to revoke the free movement regime. The Home Minister also stated that the India-Myanmar border shall be fenced for security reasons to improve border security and border management. So that is the context of the article. Now, let's understand what is free movement regime, why is this topic relevant, and what is the significance of India-Myanmar border? What are the issues present here and what is pushing the government to reconsider the free movement regime? This map presents a detailed picture of the region. You can see the entire length of the India-Myanmar border. It's one of the most important borders that we share. It stretches to around 1,600 plus kilometers. The border states that share this boundary with Myanmar include Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, and Mizoram. So these are the 4 border states. And this border that you see here is a very sensitive and a highly porous border, meaning there are many natural gaps in the border due to the complex geography and terrain of this region. This border area is dominated by hilly mountainous region, dense forests and jungles. Some rivers cut through the border as well. So this creates natural gaps in the border which are hard to fence, hard to guard and patrol. So this is exploited by organized criminal cartels and even insurgents who often infiltrate into India from this border, through this border. Now, Myanmar is also part of the Golden Triangle region. It's a global hub for organized criminal activities. It's a hub for drug production and drug trafficking. It's a hub for arms trafficking and wildlife trafficking and even human trafficking. So organized criminal activities such as these is closely linked with terrorist and insurgent activities as well. There exists a direct connection between organized crime and terrorist and insurgent activities. In fact, even money laundering is very prevalent. Cyber crimes, online gambling scandals are very rampant in Myanmar. So the presence of so many criminal networks and illicit networks, right, it does impact the security situation for India, particularly with regard to the northeast of India. Over the last 7 odd decades, India has faced an incredible challenge with regard to security and stability of the northeast. A large part of the problems emanate from the neighboring country, Myanmar, because several northeast insurgent groups, be it NSCN, ULFA, the NDFB and many others, they have taken shelter in Myanmar as they have access to safe havens present across the border, especially in the Sagaing division and the Chin state of Myanmar that borders the Indian states. Several terror safe havens have been present and they receive some cross-border support. There are indigenous ethnic groups that are connected to ethnic groups and tribal groups on the Indian side. They share historical, cultural, familial connections. So some of the insurgent organizations like the NSCN, for example, right, they have got support from the Naga subgroups on the other side of the border in Myanmar. These cross-border linkages, cross-border support that exists for criminal and terrorist activities is something that has always concerned India and bothered India. Plus, of course, India is deeply concerned about any possible involvement of China. Indian intelligence agencies strongly believe that China has been using Myanmar as a base to wage its covert proxy war against India by backing Northeast insurgents in order to destabilize the northeast of India. Apart from these concerns, the major problem for India has been the stability and the situation, the political and security situation in Myanmar. For decades, Myanmar has been under military rule, and as a result, there has been a violation of democratic rights and human rights over the decades. While India has ignored these concerns, because we always wanted strong cordial ties with the Myanmar military, the junta, because we wanted to protect our security interests and secure this border. So never has India criticized the Myanmar military for any of its violations. Now recently, just 3 years ago, Myanmar again suspended democracy. It rejected the elections, alleging that it was a fraud, and the military has taken over again. The military staged a coup again, and the junta rule has been established. So India has never outright condemned these actions of Myanmar's military in order to ensure that we maintain good ties with the government in Myanmar. Because without Myanmar's assistance and cooperation, we cannot secure this important border. Now that you know all the major issues and concerns related to the border, let's see what is free movement regime, what is it connected to, and what's the history behind the drawing of this boundary. See, this region back in 1800s was part of Burmese territory at one point. Some parts of Nagaland, Manipur and Mizoram, right? The then Kingdom of Burma had captured some of these territories. Rather, the ethnic tribal groups present here, the indigenous communities, right? They've always been connected, linked with each other. They've been part of one larger family of indigenous ethnic tribal communities. So these areas of Burmese territory, they were taken over by the British. In the 1820s, the British Empire, which was expanding its footprint in the northeast, it pushed out the Burmese state and took many of these areas in today's northeast of India and brought them under British control. Finally, the boundaries were drawn here between British India and the then state of Burma, which is the Treaty of Yandabu. Through this treaty signed in 1826, the present India-Myanmar boundary was drawn. Essentially, we inherited this border from the British. So as you can see, wherever the British have colonized, wherever they have drawn borders, they have left behind lasting legacies, which are horrific legacies. These colonial blunders are very evident across Asia, Africa, and in West Asia as well. From Israel-Palestine to India-Pakistan, right? And various other border issues and disputes around the world. Many of them are a result of colonial blunders that were committed. And the writer says this is one such colonial blunder. Without taking into account the local demography and the needs of the local people, right? The British drew haphazard boundaries under Treaty of Yandabu. They drew a border which would suit British interests, British colonial interests. After pushing back the Burmese state, the border which was drawn was designed to suit British interests. But because of this border, the communities here, the indigenous tribes, they got divided. For example, the Mizos in India, in Mizoram, are closely connected with the Chins on the other side of the border in Myanmar. Similarly, the Nagas found across northeast India, not just in Nagaland, the larger Naga subgroup of ethnic community can be found not just in Nagaland, but also in parts of Assam, Manipur, and Arunachal Pradesh as well. So there are few Naga subgroups and subclans found here in Myanmar as well. So they are connected historically. They have familial ties with each other. Then coming to Manipur, the Kukis, who are currently in news, are closely linked with the Chins and the larger Zomi community found on the other side of the border in Myanmar. So essentially, these ethnic indigenous tribal groups got separated, divided by this border. So post-independence, India inherited this boundary. Myanmar was born, right? And this was settled as the permanent international border between the two countries. But this affected the local cultural relations between villages that were separated on both sides of the border. Families were separated. Border trade had been compromised. So in order to facilitate this, in order to revive border trade and allow people of the border areas to interact with each other, to reunite those families, to give them an opportunity to regularly meet families on the other side of the border, a free movement regime was introduced in 2018. It was one of the important foreign policy initiatives of the Modi government under its Act East policy. Act East policy is focused on improving our ties with Southeast Asian countries and of course the East Asian countries as well. But Myanmar being a focus country under Act East, a free movement regime was worked out between India and Myanmar. Under this regime, a visa-free arrangement was created for people residing within 16 kilometers of the international border, and they could visit the other side by possessing just a travel document. They just have to obtain a 1-year valid document under the free movement regime. They don't have to apply for regular visas. It's a visa-free arrangement available only to the residents of border villages present within 16 kilometers of this boundary on both the sides. So 16 kilometers on the Indian side, 16 kilometers on the side of Myanmar. So the border villages present here and those who are residents of these border villages, only they are eligible for this mobility initiative, and they can obtain this document through which they can travel throughout the year. And at one visit, at one time, they can stay for 2 weeks on the other side, meet the family members, engage in border trade and come back. So such a flexible immigration mechanism was created, a visa-free arrangement was created to promote people-to-people relations, to promote the local border economy as well, and to promote the cultural ties between the two countries. But now, this arrangement has come under question because of what has happened in Myanmar over the last 3 years and the impact it has had on especially Manipur. I'm sure all of you are aware of the ethnic violence that has gripped Manipur since the last year. There has been large-scale violence between the major ethnic groups. The Meiteis on one side, the majority Meiteis, and the minority Kuki-Zo community on the other side. Essentially, it's a clash between the valley-based Meitei groups and the hill-based Kuki-Zomi groups. Several armed outfits on both the sides have targeted each other, engaged in large-scale violence over a fight for identity, a fight for tribal status, a fight for land and resources. In fact, Manipur, which has suffered from insurgency back in the 1960s and 70s, right? It has always been affected by the ethnic divisions. The insurgency in Manipur that existed before as well was a result of the ethnic divisions between Meiteis and Kukis and Meiteis and Nagas. So these divisions are erupting again, and the state government of Manipur believes the problem lies in Myanmar. Because as Myanmar came back under military rule and a civil war broke out in the country, refugees have been flowing into India on a large scale. According to the state governments here, Manipur and Mizoram, and the government of India, the Home Ministry that deals with border management, thousands of refugees have come into India and they've taken shelter in Mizoram and Manipur. For example, the Chins from the Chin state have moved out and they have come to Mizoram to take shelter because Mizos are connected to Chins. They are welcoming them, they are protecting them because there is a threat for Chins. There is a life threat. Myanmar's military has been targeting them. It's been conducting airstrikes and targeted ground military operations, carrying out large-scale human rights violations. Similarly, members of Zomi community, they have moved across into Manipur and they have been sheltered by the Kukis who are connected to them. But this led to an allegation in Manipur by the state government, by the chief minister himself, Biren Singh, and also by the majority Meiteis, that Kukis, those who are coming in as refugees who are being settled by the Kukis in the hill regions of Manipur, it was alleged that they were engaging in narco trafficking, meaning they were clearing forest land and growing drugs. And based on these accusations, right, the Meiteis had raised a strong demand as well for ST status following a high court order. And the overall mishandling of the security situation triggered large-scale ethnic violence between the two communities. See, we are not sitting in judgment of who's right, who's wrong. It's a very complex issue. It's a deep-rooted issue. It's an ethnic problem, right? But the point here is that the developments in our neighboring country has spilled over from across the border and it has had some kind of impact on the internal security situation in Manipur. So since Manipur was badly affected and the state government was opposed to the entry of refugees and the Zo community members, it appealed to the government of India to end the free movement regime. Now the MHA is considering it, and that's why Home Minister Amit Shah has said that we will consider free movement regime and we might revoke it and we might consider fencing this whole border to check infiltration. Because historically, this border has enabled cross-border infiltration of insurgents and as well as organized criminals. But revocation of free movement regime and establishing a border, a fenced border, is being strongly opposed by the other states, that is Mizoram and Nagaland. Because Naga's connection with the Naga subgroups will be affected. Mizo's connection with Chinns will be affected if free movement regime is withdrawn. So that is why the other states are opposing its withdrawal, whereas Manipur is calling for it, as the state government is seen to be, at least alleged to be, on the side of the majority Meiteis who are in opposition right now towards the Kuki-Zo members. So this is the complex situation in the northeast, and you can understand the impact of the events in Myanmar on India's internal security. So please understand what is the free movement regime, why was it implemented, understand the geography of the region, the security challenges present here. All these topics can be very important when you're analyzing a question from either IR or internal security. So with this, I complete the detailed discussion of the three major columns today. Now let's head towards the prelim section and take a look at the smaller articles. We have an article on the front page of the Delhi edition that refers to a term called POWs, prisoners of war or prisoners of war. According to the article, a Russian military plane carrying around 65 Ukrainian prisoners of war has been allegedly shot down by Ukraine itself. This is Russia's allegation against Ukraine. The development itself is not too important for the exam. It is a continuation of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where both sides have been blaming each other, engaging in large-scale violence against each other. But the point to note here is, who are POWs, prisoners of war? Are they defined under any international convention? Right? That is something we should understand. POWs, or prisoners of war, are basically combatants who are captured in a conflict. Basically, they are military personnel who are captured by the enemy during a state of war or a state of conflict. So historically, we have seen that in any conflict, the prisoners of war are ill-treated. They are not given humane treatment. They are tortured, they are mutilated, they are denied basic rights and even basic access to food and medicine, and eventually they might be killed as well. So recently, that is in the modern 19th, 20th century, a debate came up regarding how POWs have to be treated. If you look at medieval times, and even if you look at 18th, 17th century, right, there was no consensus around the world to treat prisoners of war with any humane consideration. But following the First and Second World War, an international framework came up under the Geneva Convention. The Geneva Conventions, right, it consists of 4 separate treaties dealing with humanitarian law and humanitarian treatment during times of war and conflict. So here the third Geneva Convention, it specifically deals with POWs. It refers to the treatment of prisoners of war, how the POWs have to be treated and handled by the other state which has captured them. So under the third Geneva Convention, all the parties to the convention, all those who have signed and ratified it, they are obligated to protect the human rights of POWs, to ensure that they are treated in a humane manner. So you can look at the rights which is accorded to them through the third Geneva Convention. For example, they can't be arrested and thrown into prisons. They have to be kept in a camp. And the state which has arrested them, which has taken them as POWs, it has to repatriate them, send them back to the home country. It has to ensure that they are given basic access to food, water, medicines. It has to ensure that no torture or mutilation is committed. It has to ensure that no information, personal information of these combatants is revealed, because public curiosity, right, it could backfire. And if the state is trying to please the public by revealing the identity of these soldiers who are captured, tomorrow the mobs could beat up or attack the POWs. And sometimes it could happen with state support. So to prevent any such atrocities against POWs, a number of protections and rights are accorded through the third Geneva Convention. Now please find out whether India is party to the third Geneva Convention on POWs. That's a small exercise for you, a small homework. Please figure out what is India's stand on the third Geneva Convention. And please mention that in the comments below. Next, on page 4, there is an article mentioning the South Asian University. Recently, a petition was filed at a high court with regard to an administrative issue regarding suspension of few professors at this university. So the case itself is not relevant for us, but South Asian University is an important topic in international relations. So what is the South Asian University? It's a university established by the SAARC regional grouping, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. This grouping brings together 8 South Asian countries, that is India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka and Maldives, Pakistan and Afghanistan. So these 8 member countries of SAARC, they have established a university to promote this university as a center of excellence, to promote cooperation in higher education, and it is established in New Delhi. The idea was first proposed by then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in 2005 during the Dhaka summit of SAARC. Later, the proposal was accepted, consensus developed amongst all the 8 members, and in 2007, the agreement was signed for the establishment of this university. And finally, in 2010, the South Asian University was established. But however, there are a lot of controversies surrounding its functioning. It's been heavily criticized, and experts have said that this is a failed initiative of SAARC. Just like the grouping, right? The university also has failed, according to many strategic experts. Because SAARC is considered as a failed organization. It has not been able to achieve its core objectives, which is regional integration and economic integration. Because within the SAARC members, there are a lot of disputes, hostilities between them. For example, India, Pakistan, and now India, Maldives, constant troubles between India, Sri Lanka, etc. So these bilateral issues and the instability in South Asia, the backwardness in South Asia has derailed SAARC as a grouping. So South Asian University has also been affected, obviously. It has been alleged that it doesn't get enough funding. There are questions regarding its academic status, regarding the quality of professors, the way the institution is run, the quality of the content provided. A lot of questions have been raised about how the university has been administered. So it's frequently in news, but please know that it's an initiative of the SAARC countries. It's one of the major initiatives, but there are a lot of controversies surrounding it. Next, on page 16, we have an important update. A small Pacific island nation called Nauru has recently revoked its diplomatic recognition of Taiwan, and it has established ties with China, that is the PRC, the People's Republic of China. So this is related to the China-Taiwan dispute. The PRC, ruled by the Communist Party, which rules over mainland China, has always claimed sovereignty over the island territory of Taiwan. This conflict between PRC and Republic of China in Taiwan dates back to the Chinese Civil War, to the 1940s. So PRC has always insisted that Taiwan is not a sovereign nation, and it expects every country to follow the One China principle and One China policy. It has pressurized many countries to accept that there is only one China. There is one Chinese state and there is only one China, that there is no another territory called Taiwan, or there's no other Chinese government called Republic of China. This has been PRC's consistent position, and most countries have accepted this. Even India, for example, from the very beginning, we recognize the PRC as the legitimate state of mainland China. Even India doesn't have official ties with Taiwan. We don't have official diplomatic ties. But few countries, very few countries in the world, they did recognize Taiwan, and they had diplomatic ties with Taiwan. And they had cut off ties with China, that is PRC. But now, China is influencing several small nations, especially the Pacific Island region and few other weak, poor countries around the world. It's influencing them with money, its diplomatic power and military power, and convincing them to stop recognizing Taiwan and switch recognition to the PRC. So Nauru has become the latest country to do that. It's a Pacific Island nation. Please make a note of the location. It can be important for a map-based question in prelims. In the Pacific Island region in the South Pacific, right? That is where the small nation of Nauru is located. Of late, China has been extending its diplomatic and military influence quite extensively into this region. China has signed a security defense agreement with Solomon Islands. It is pushing its navy and projecting its military power constantly and challenging the other established powers like US, Australia and others. So it has managed to convince Nauru to end its ties with Taiwan, and it has restarted its ties with the PRC, the People's Republic of China. So that is a big development. Then finally, coming to the last article for today, Turkey has ratified Sweden's membership of NATO. NATO, as you know, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, established in 1949, is essentially a military alliance. Right? It was established through the Washington Convention that was signed after the Second World War. And it brings the Western countries together under the leadership of US and European countries. There's a military alliance which has been formed. And the core principle of NATO is the principle of collective defense. Under Article 5 of Washington Convention, NATO countries commit to come to the assistance of the other NATO member if they are attacked by a third party, by a non-NATO country. So that's what you mean by the principle of collective defense. So until recently, NATO had just 30 members, right? US, Canada, of course, and many European countries. They had all aligned under the leadership of US to form this military alliance. But recently, after Russia invaded Ukraine, after Russia posed a threat to East Europe and the wider region of Europe, a few neutral countries like Finland and Sweden, they started aspiring for NATO's membership. See, even during the Cold War period, when there were heightened tensions between the West and the East, these Scandinavian countries, Finland and Sweden, they had remained neutral. They had a non-alignment principle in their foreign policy. They neither aligned with Soviet Union nor with the US power bloc. But now that Russia has become extremely aggressive and violated international law by invading Ukraine, these countries felt threatened as they share boundaries with Russia. So following this, both Finland and Sweden have applied for membership of NATO, and Finland recently became the 31st member of NATO. So now Sweden's application was pending from a long time. But Turkey, which is also a NATO member, had been blocking the application of Finland and Sweden. Right? Finally, it lifted the block, it ratified Finland's membership, and now, after several months of delay, it has ratified Sweden's membership as well. And since there is consensus amongst all NATO countries right now, very soon Sweden will also join as the 32nd member of NATO. So there are many important points to note down here. One, why was Turkey opposing the membership of Finland and Sweden? It is said that Turkey is concerned about the Kurd armed groups, Kurd militants, who target Turkey in the Kurd region, right? It's the region where the Kurd community can be found in parts of Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria. They are leading an insurgent war against Turkey to liberate the region to form a separate country called Kurdistan. So there is a Kurdish extremist outfit called the PKK, which is a designated terror group by few countries. Turkey, US, and few countries have designated this group, this extremist outfit, as a terrorist organization. But members of this outfit are sheltered in Sweden and Finland. Turkey has alleged that Sweden and Finland have allowed Kurd groups and Kurd members who are designated as terrorists under this outfit, right? They have allegedly been sheltered in these countries. That was one reason why Turkey was opposing the membership, but now it has lifted the block. A few months ago, it ratified the membership application of Finland. So Finland became the 31st member, and now Sweden is all set to become the 32nd member. So the final question here is there a criteria to become a NATO member? There is a criteria, but it's not a checklist. It's not a mandatory criteria, but yes, there is a certain criteria which the member countries have to meet, which the aspiring countries have to meet to become a member. So according to NATO, first and foremost, a country which is applying for NATO's membership has to be a democracy. It should be firmly rooted in democratic principles and constitutional principles. Then its economic model should be inclined towards market economy, towards the capitalist market-driven economy model. It can't be a state-controlled economy. It can't be a socialist economy. All right. Next, the military forces of that country, the armed forces, have to be under civilian control. The elected government has to have full authority over the armed forces. It should respect international law, respect the borders of its neighbors, and be a good neighbor. It should not threaten the neighboring countries and violate their integrity and sovereignty. And finally, its armed forces must be compatible with NATO with regard to the defense equipment they have, defense technologies they have, and the defense budget they have. Right? They should comply with NATO norms. For example, they're expected to spend 2% of their GDP on defense expenditure. They're expected to provide a base for NATO troops and NATO weapons. Right? So all these obligations have to be met, and the only way through which a country can become a member is by applying, which has to be supported. The application has to be supported by all the current members. It has to be ratified in their parliaments, approved in their respective legislatures, elected legislatures, and only if there is consensus amongst all the members, only then a new member is added. So basically every member has a veto. Even if one country doesn't agree and doesn't ratify the approval required, right, then the application will fall apart and the country can't become a member. So Turkey was the only one which was holding out and blocking the membership of Finland and Sweden. Finland became a member a few months back. Finally, Turkey ratified it, and now it has ratified Sweden's membership. So very soon, Sweden will also be joining NATO. So this completes my detailed discussion of today's The Hindu. Please take a look at the mains practice questions. It's all based on what I've explained, what we have discussed today. So I expect you to write an answer and if possible, post the answer in the comments below. The Genocide Convention is a crucial part of international law in order to uphold human rights. But recent events have challenged this rules-based order. Discuss. Provision of clean drinking water can have a huge impact on rural health. In the light of the statement, evaluate the functioning and impact of Jal Jeevan Mission. So please take up the questions seriously because answer writing is very critical to ensure that you crack mains. So I hope you guys have liked today's session. Do let me know in the comments, press the like button, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. So that's it for today. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.